Oh, so schön.
Great to have you in this show. So
Thank you so much.
for me, it's new to do this in English. My English is not that perfect, but yours is, I know. And I'm very happy to do it in English with you. And you are
Thank you.
a certified health coach. You are a family constellation therapist and inner dance meditation instructor, as well as founder of Audacity, a very innovative digital platform for women. You are also a mom of two. You are grown up half in Namibia and half in Switzerland, so very interesting background. And then lived 15 years in Botswana, also now living in Switzerland. And we are very deeply connected because we are in the same mastermind group. And as we are so deeply connected, I know that in the past few years you have had a very challenging journey, actually. So a few years ago, you were just doing your life. You were preparing even for a marathon. You were very fit and healthy, I remember. And then suddenly you were hit by COVID. This was actually a day before the marathon. This was so interesting, and your life changed, and you had to cancel the event for which you had spent so much time in preparation. Your illness turned into long COVID, so you had very strong symptoms. You were totally limited. You are going to talk about this in a few minutes a bit more. You are also a single mom of two, so I think it was particularly challenging also because of this. And I really admire you, how you then could turn things, being the strong woman you are, you really took your health into your own hands, and yeah, you were able to deeply, deeply heal and get your energy back. And what it was like to live this journey, to really go through all that, to have these strong symptoms and face them. That's what we are going to talk about, how you were able to recover from long COVID even. So very, very happy to talk with you about this, and it's an honor to have you here. Thank you, Nathania.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for having me. Really, really cool. And like you said, it's really special because we know each other quite well through our monthly mastermind calls, which is really beautiful. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much. And thank you for that introduction.
So my first question is just like, who are you in your words? Maybe you want to add something to this introduction. And what is one thing that you really like at the moment?
Ooh, okay. I think you did a fantastic introduction. You covered a lot, I think. And when you say, who am I? It's so funny because 2.5 years ago when I got COVID, and then 5 months later when I had this huge crash, I think that was like the main question I was confronted with. Who am I? Because I felt like everything was stripped, from me. I felt like it was just a complete reboot and reset that I was going through. And we'll talk more about that. And today, I think it's funny because I still don't find that an easy question to answer. And I guess I would answer it by I'm many things. I'm not just one thing. Whereas maybe previously I identified myself by being a mom to two children, or, being a family constellation facilitator. And now I guess sort of what makes me and who I am is sort of the sum of it all. So it's everything I've experienced until today, and it will continue to be whatever I experience next, and the challenges that come with it, the gifts that come with it. It's also definitely something I learned and experienced is the network around me has a big impact as well. I couldn't have made it through this very difficult time without my family, for example. So I think who we are, and I guess who makes us, is so much. So I don't think I can answer it with one thing, with one word. When you ask, what do I love or what do I like? I guess the first thing that comes to mind would be nature, because for me, it's a very broad word, I know, but it's sort of my go-to place. It's where I feel like if I lie in the grass, I feel supported. I feel held. I feel not alone. It's like where I go to reconnect. And like just this morning when I rode to work on my bike, it was the wind in my face. I love it so much. It always gives me this freeing feeling. So it's definitely aspects of nature, or just looking into the sky and seeing the different formations of clouds. It's something that it does something, to me. I breathe a little bit deeper. So nature is definitely my go-to place, and something I love, and it's so diverse. So there's so many different aspects to discover in nature. So yeah.
Nice. I'm for sure going to look a bit more at the clouds next time. I'm absolutely great inspiration. Thank you. So yeah, let's talk about your journey with COVID. How was it for you actually to suddenly be hit by COVID and then also get the diagnosis of long COVID?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was definitely unexpected and a shock because, like you mentioned already, I was in a very, and I wasn't always active, but I was in a very active phase of my life where I trained for a mountain marathon. I was doing trail running. I felt like I found something that fulfilled me. Mm-hmm. Being out in nature, being active. I had quit alcohol, which was inspired by going into training. So I was really I felt like I was in a phase of my life where I was really sort of connecting with myself. I was listening to my body, my intuition. And so it came very unexpectedly. Mm-hmm. And I guess there was now I can say this, there was so much I needed to look at and learn. And it definitely, I think what it did for me, it was a complete full stop. Like it was a handbrake. Yeah. I mean, I was such not necessarily a busy person, but I was somebody that was constantly functioning and like on a very high level. I'm somebody who has very high expectations for myself, and good was never good enough. And you could always do it, a little bit better. There was always things I could learn and improve. And I was trying to just, be a great mother, be good at work, at the same time take care of myself. So I feel, and I'm saying this now, I was completely unaware of the fact that I was putting so much pressure on myself because it was very much part of my nature and how I functioned. But because I was a very high functioning human, I think getting this handbrake by getting long COVID was completely unexpected and something I really, really struggled with for a very long time to also accept. I think the whole acceptance journey took months. So I got COVID in September 21, and I only had my crash in February 2022. Mm. And my crash wasn't something spectacular. I was on holiday with my sister in Egypt, and everything, I mean, between September and my crash, I never recovered fully from my COVID. Which means when my doctor asked me what energy level are you functioning on, I would always say, well, probably around 50% of what I know. And I just figured it'll come, and I did slow down in those days. Looking back, I didn't slow down enough. But at that point, my slowing down was slowing down, and yeah. And then when I had my crash, like I said, it wasn't spectacular. What I mean by that, it was literally like we were in town in Cairo, and it was just too much for me to take in. Everything was all of a sudden it became overwhelming. I was exhausted, and my breakdown consisted of pretty much a panic attack. And I just started crying, and I didn't know what was going on. And I just couldn't stop crying. I was shaking, and it was just a full-blown panic attack. Yeah. And so that's how it all came about. I really struggled to sort of finish the holidays and travel back home. And yeah, and then funny enough, it got
like you
sorry?
Like it was really constant. Even in the evening, your system didn't calm down. You were still in this shock.
No, that's a good question. The panic attack, it then subsided. So it was like, okay, I was okay again, but it was as if it's sort of a switch had been switched in my body. It was almost as if I could feel, for the first time, I could sort of feel like I'm not going to be okay anymore by just, continuing to do what I'm doing. Something's wrong. So it's almost like a switched in my body. And I was like, okay, shit, this is like proper exhaustion, And I mean, we then slowed everything down, like big time, for the rest of the days we were still there. Yeah, and I could, on my travels back to Switzerland, I could feel that I was very sensitive to light and sound and people around me. So it was very tricky. So yeah, I think in the beginning it was very scary because I didn't know what was going on. Only later, when I then got home and I went to see the doctor and I started going on sick leave and things didn't get better. So my sick leave got extended and extended again. And, then you start doing all the medical tests. And only slowly but surely I sort of got into the whole long COVID thing. And then I started to read more about long COVID. I started reading about the symptoms. I started, you start Googling, trying to figure out what's going on with my body, what's happening.
What was it?
And
what you were Googling? What was the most shocking symptom for you?
Yeah. Number one definitely was the fatigue, because that's not something I was used to. I was never, I guess, like I described before, I was not somebody who was used to being tired even. I knew I had to, like during training, I learned really well that I needed enough rest to perform, so I knew I had to sleep between 8 and 10 hours to perform at the high level I was performing at. So I very much understood that concept, but the fact that I couldn't walk stairs anymore, or that I got up from the couch to make tea and my heart rate was on 150, that kind of stuff. It was like, what is going on? Or when I rested and I wouldn't feel rested, and then all these funny symptoms would happen. Like I would feel dizzy. I couldn't sleep. I had like pins and needles in my legs. Brain fog came later. That's sort of a neurological symptom. There's a lot of those in the brain. I had, from the very onset, I had tremors. So it would feel like my whole body would shake. But internally, you couldn't see it on the outside. And I really struggled to breathe properly. So that, more if, like, for example, like when I went to the kitchen to make a tea, I guess because of the heart rate that went up so quickly, I just struggled to breathe, or it felt like there was pressure on my chest, and so I found it fascinating that when I did all the lung tests and all the blood tests and the heart test and the MRIs, they couldn't find anything. And that sort of makes you question things. But definitely sort of the main symptom for me was the fatigue, where, I mean, we laugh about it now because I have one friend that also had long COVID, not as intensely as I did. But there was a time we messaged each other that we can't make the bed, like it's too exhausting to shake the blanket out and make the bed, and I mean, there was days or times or phases over months where I showered like once a week because I couldn't, it was like running a marathon, just taking a shower and standing in the shower,
And not just like 1 week, it was for several weeks. So
yeah,
really.
It really was. It really was. So when
and then you were able to go to sick leave, which is great for your responsibility regarding work, but you're also a mom of two. So how did you manage this?
Exactly. So I think this is where it really took me a while to understand, because after Egypt, when I got home after the crash, I figured, okay, I tried to it's funny looking back because I thought I was being accepting of the situation. But what I only understood a few months later is that I was accepting of my situation as long as it was very conditional. So I was accepting of the situation as long as it was getting better, or as long as I knew, okay, in 3 months I'm back, to how I was. It was very, and now I know that's not acceptance, Acceptance, funny enough, is unconditional and it's open-ended, and it's not for me to decide how long it will take. And so it really took me, it took me maybe a month to realize that I can't cope on my own. And I remember it was a really dark moment where my kids were at school. I was in bed. I closed the shutters. I switched off the light. I closed my door. I put the blanket over myself, and it was still too much. And so I felt like I was shutting myself completely off, but I still couldn't sort of bear it. It almost felt like unbearable. And I literally had a panic attack thinking of my kids coming back from school because I didn't know, I just couldn't handle the fact that there was noise, that there was other people, that I had to, make lunch, that I had to deal with my daughter's school, that kind of stuff. All the things that come with being a mom. And so I talked to my mother, and my parents both stay in Botswana because, like you mentioned, we all lived there for 15 years. And I came to Switzerland with my kids 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I had, talked to my parents, and my mom decided to come and support me. So she came to Switzerland for a month. And then my sister came, who's also based in Botswana. And funny enough, that was in April, May. I thought I'd be fine after they left. And only 10 days or 2 weeks later, I realized I still can't cope on my own. So it was really a huge, I think for me also to accept help, because I was always somebody who was so high functioning, and I functioned very well on my own, doing things on my own. I wasn't used to accepting and asking for help. And so that was a big step. And then my mom and my dad decided to come back to Switzerland, and they've stayed for almost a year. So that's why they both came, because they realized, okay, we're coming for long term. And they really dropped everything, and they came to Switzerland, and they stayed until, last year, January. So that was huge. And I think that once that was done, I think I could realize, okay, somebody's here. And I think by then, that was May 2022, I think by then I started slowly but surely to understand that, okay, this is going to take way longer than I expected. And this is just going to take time. And at that time, I started with my occupational therapist, Angie, and she was just a fantabulous person. She had specialized in long COVID, which was rare for that time to really have somebody who understands. And she guided me for almost a year. And she was really sort of the only one that I felt at that time understood what was going on and was really able to coach me through it. And the key word, I think, and I still hear her voice at times, is just pacing. And that, because I didn't know what to do, because I would rest, but still not be rested. And so I learned through Anji and through the concept of pacing, I started learning that I needed to regenerate some energy. My battery was completely empty, right? And so it was this concept, okay, you can't do anything unless your battery starts to refill. Because I would constantly, there would be maybe 5% in my battery, and then I would do something that uses 20%, and then I'd be on minus again. And so she would teach me to always refill first, and then use a little bit of the battery, make sure you leave some for unexpected things, or for, being able to refill it. So that, sorry?
How did you refill the battery? What can we do to refill our batteries?
Yeah, good question. I think it's a very individual thing. Mm-hmm. For me, I can share a little bit. There was so many different things. I very much went with my intuition and sort of started trusting my body and my body wisdom. And of course, I did a lot of reading and a lot of researching. And I really started working over the body. So I would do things like TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. I would do shiatsu, acupuncture, I would take herbs and tinctures. I would supplement with different supplements, playing around with different amounts. A big thing that I can say definitely, there's things that when I tried them, I could see they're making a difference. I could feel it. And other things I knew they somehow added to boosting my energy, but it wasn't as obvious. But something, for example, juicing. I did a lot of juicing. green juicing, red juicing, spinach, beetroot, all that kind of stuff, like raw vegetables. Because I just knew that if I can fuel my body with the right things, somehow it'll turn it into some sort of, energy and do some sort of healing in my body. So it was a lot of going out into nature. And because I didn't have the energy to take the bus or take the bike or walk, my mom would drive us, to the edge of the forest. And I would literally just get out of the car and lie on the grass. And that's all I needed.
Wow.
So it was a lot of nature. It was a lot of body work, like massages. I also went for breathwork therapy for quite a long time, which was also a very holistic approach where we dived into sort of what could be the reason behind my body going through what it's going through. So I'm a big proponent, or I'm a big believer in, I think everything's connected. So I'm a big believer that what we go through physically is a reflection of what we go through internally. So not to say all our physical symptoms are psychosomatic, but I am a big believer that a lot of it you can somehow trace back to some sort of connections on a soul level, or a spiritual level, or whatever you want to call it. So that's a big part of the work I've done in the last 2 years, was to sort of dive into what could the body be telling me? What's the message here? What is it the body wants me to learn,
Nice.
Yeah.
So it was like really a puzzle. Like everybody who's sitting here with me and talks about the health journey, it's always this kind of puzzle. And also when I work with my coaching clients, it's always like sort of a puzzle. Very, very interesting. And what I really liked, thank you for sharing this, is that first you had to do the acceptance, and the acceptance, it's really like full acceptance, like no resistance to what's happening, and just accepting that maybe it's going to take years until you have your energy back. And then from this acceptance, you could do like juicing, nutrition, but also going to nature, and also this internal work, mindset shifts, very deep work too. So very, very interesting. And you were really able to recover from long COVID like this. So maybe I think people are listening to this now are very curious to know, how are you feeling now? And what's the role of long or even COVID in your life now?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I would say I talk about long COVID in the past tense now, which was funny when I heard myself do that for the first time. When I was like, I had long COVID, I stopped for a moment. I was like, oh wow. And I would say at the same time, it's still very much present in terms of, I look at it, it's still accompanying me. So it's definitely, and I guess this is very much depends on the perspective, right? Because people, like just my brother the other day asked, well, if you compare it to where you were before, where are you in terms of energy levels? And I don't like comparing it to before, because before I was on a peak level of performance. I was doing trail running, running marathons and everything. So it's tricky. But compared to where I was and to where I am now, I'm doing really, really well. So, for example, I'm back at work, which is not the first thing that we should use for measurement, but it is often in our society, it's an indication of how well we're doing. So that is something, and I'm slowly, very slowly, and this is the message here, for me, everything is happening at a very, very slow pace. And in the meantime, I know I know the reason behind that. So I'm slowly building up at work. I'm able to, be here for my kids. I'm able to meet friends again. I'm able to go for walks. So there's so much I can do that I wasn't able to do before. I'm able to, take the train and the bus, which is something I couldn't do for a really long time. I'm able to attend a party, or just on Saturday, I was chilling with my brother and his girlfriend in the sun outside. And that's something I couldn't do. It was so funny. I had a moment on Saturday where I said, oh my goodness, I haven't been able to chill in the sun without getting dizzy. So dizziness in the sun was something, So it's these firsts that I'm experiencing constantly. I had to laugh the other time because I was like, oh, these days I'm comfortable wearing my bra again. Because for more than a year, I couldn't wear it because it would make me feel like I'm suffocating. And then you have little things that always make me laugh. Like the other time I was in the train and I was, for a millisecond, I was looking for a light switch because it felt so bright. And I was just wondering, oh, can't I dim the lights, So there's still things that are very much there and they're continuing to be there and it's okay. And I'm still very much pacing, Pacing, I think, is something that will accompany me for years to come, probably. And in the meantime, it's turned into something very positive. So what that means is beforehand, when I wasn't able to do all 10 things that I wanted to do, it was a failure in my eyes. Whereas now I have no problem telling my friend, like just this Sunday, I can't meet with you. And not because I had a lot of other things to do, but just because I needed some time to spend with myself.
Okay.
So
interesting. So yeah. Really amazing. I mean, you really are leading a normal life again. And it's just like these little things that still remind you. And you also took your gift up from it. So this is very, very beautiful. Amazing. Thank you for sharing this.
Yeah.
So maybe just one last question. What is one health routine, maybe you already talked about it, that is very, very important for you now?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good one. I think for me personally, what comes to mind would be, I think it really comes back to taking care of myself. So, apart from things like watching what I eat or, sleeping enough and all of that, I think it's really giving myself the time to rest when I need to rest and being able to say no, or, setting boundaries and really sort of trusting myself. Checking in with myself, because at this point I can check in with myself and sort of hear or sense what my body needs. And I really think if we can, because if I think to before, I would hear the nudge, I would hear my intuition saying, no, that's probably too much, but I would ignore it. Because I'd say, no, you can manage, no big deal. You'll be fine. You'll rest later, And now it's really like when I hear that nudge, it's like, okay, hold on. We don't need another warning. It's the nudge is enough. So let's listen, So I really think it's that.
Yeah. Really listening to what your intuition tells you.
Yeah, exactly. Really leaning into that and trusting that. Absolutely.
I think you're a very great example for this, at least for me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for this advice. This was very, very interesting, and I could talk with you for hours about your journey because I think there's so much people can take from it. Not having long COVID, I don't really know hands-on what this experience is like. So even this is already very interesting. But also in your journey, there are so many little things that I can take from my life too. So very, very interesting. Thank you a lot. I really think we should share things and grow together. So that's really, really precious.